Perhaps you just finished watching my review of the Surface Laptop 7 Copilot Plus PC, and you heard me mention in that video that one of the biggest features of these Copilot Plus PCs is not actually there at launch. We're talking about Microsoft Recall, this ability for this computer to every 2 or 3 seconds take a screenshot of what you are doing and then use OCR, optical content recognition, to create a sort of searchable index of exactly what was on your screen. We're not just talking about text, we're talking about visual to images can be scanned and identified so that you can at any point simply search and it will look through everything you've done for the last, month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever you've set this thing to, and it can take you right back to where you are. This is very, very impressive, if not a little bit of a security concern. I'm talking about that right now because there was a post on Threads back on the 24th. I've been ruminating about this for a while, and I've come back around to it. This is from Michal Ramon. And like I said, I think this is pretty interesting. Food for thought, he says. Since the upcoming update to Google's Gemini Nano model will support image processing, Google could very well build something like Windows Recall into Android. Android already takes snapshots of your screen whenever you switch apps. They're stored, it doesn't matter, and are used for the recent screen. So extending this to have snapshots be taken periodically and then having Nano process these screenshots to build a searchable database is feasible. So to put this very, very, like as simply as I possibly could, on your phone, whenever you do your recent screen where you swipe up and you hold, you have these little snapshots that have been taken of your phone. And it does this every time you go home. So if you're in an application and then you swipe up to go home, it is going to generate a new snapshot, a new snippet for that little recent screen. What Michal is saying is that they could just simply speed that process up, have it take screenshots more regularly, have it do it every 2 or 3 seconds, and then use Gemini Nano to do the exact same thing, to scan them, do image recognition. Now, if you don't know, there's a difference between Gemini and Gemini Nano. This is actually ridiculously complicated because a lot of people hear Gemini now and they just think of this thing that pops up on your screen that replaces Google Assistant, and it can search for things and it can do all sorts of image generation. And it's been able to process images for a long time. But that is not Gemini Nano. That is the app called Gemini, and it runs on a version of a large language model, which is also called Gemini. I made this quick diagram to hopefully help make this make sense. So LLM, large language model. You have Gemini Nano, Gemini Pro, and Gemini Ultra. Gemini Pro and Gemini Ultra both can power the Gemini application, which was this thing, okay? The thing that you probably think of as Gemini. Gemini Nano runs locally on the device. It is the one that perhaps you have seen on the Pixel 8 Pro or on some S24 line of phones that allow you to do things like text generation, so like smart replies or summarization of recordings and things like that. It is the same LLM. It's a smaller, stripped down version. It runs locally on the device. So what Michal is saying here is that the Nano model will be able to do image processing locally on the device. And that is important. When we talk about Windows Recall, that OCR stuff is meant to be happening locally on the device. That makes it secure. So the screenshot is taken, that screenshot stays on your device. Hopefully it is encrypted. It is then scanned again on your device, and then that index is also only on your device, not in the cloud, hopefully encrypted. So by doing this, it becomes a sort of safe, secure database that allows you to search through or recall everything you've done on your laptop, your computer, or in this case, potentially, theoretically, your phone. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because we had a brand new thing announced that I'll show you this article on Android Authority. Recall on Android. Motorola is giving it a go. So they have their brand new Moto Razr and Razr Plus for 2024, and they have a very interesting feature. This has gone from being a theoretical thing that Michal talked about to being something that Motorola is kind of experimenting with already. We have this little snippet here that explains how this is going to work. A command to remember this will capture live moments or on-screen information, saving them automatically with AI-generated details. Information will be stored on the user's device for easy recall later. So there is one, well, there's probably more than one, but there's one really, really big difference between what we're talking about with Windows and this theoretical, hypothetical thing that Michelle's talking about, and this. This is being done only when you tell it to. You are telling it, remember this, it scans and it remembers it. That is a big distinction. It's not just remembering things every 2 or 3 seconds, right? So I will say that is going to help with the security risk, right? So it's not going to be remembering things that you don't want it to. You're on a website or an app that you don't want to be being scanned. You're going to have a setting. And yes, Microsoft kind of already solved this problem. You can tell it to, you can blacklist websites and applications so that when you're on those things, it's not going to be scanning at that point. Android would have to have something similar, but what Motorola is doing is they're saying, let's not even do that. We're not going to scan everything and blacklist things. We're going to scan nothing, and then you have to tell us to do it. The problem there is that you have to remember that you need to remember something, and I feel like that's going to kind of defeat the purpose. Oh man, I wish I could go back to this thing that I have forgotten, but I forgot to remember it. Do you see where I'm going with this? Ultimately, I do think that what we have between Microsoft and now Motorola, we have a sort of testing of the water, some early days on features like this. And I think that if it goes well, or at least not terribly for these two, I think more OEMs are going to begin experimenting with a feature like this. If they can convince people that it is safe and secure, there is absolutely some utility to be had in a feature like this. I do want to hear from you guys, though. There's 2 gigantic things, gigantic questions that have to be answered. 1, would you ever trust this feature or a feature like this? What would it take? Little like side tangent. What would it take to convince you that it is safe and secure? And if you do then trust that it is safe and secure, do you agree with me that there is utility, there's usefulness in a feature like this? How useful do you think it would be to you? Personally, I think it's a little bit hard to gauge because we've never really had anything quite like this before, but I do feel like it's got to be at least a little bit useful, right? As our devices get better and better at doing AI things, and I think that this is something that not everybody maybe understands, forever and ever we had a CPU and we had a GPU. I'm oversimplifying things, but whatever. CPU, GPU. Now we have NPUs. Now we have things that are dedicated to these sorts of AI tasks. We're building this out in the hardware realm, and the software is coming along too. We're going to be doing more and more of this stuff locally on our devices. It's going to be quicker and more secure, and by virtue of that, we're going to be finding and thinking of new novel ways to actually use that hardware, things that we've never really considered in real life doing before. And I think that this sort of universal recall thing is a great example of the kinds of things that are going to be coming. It's going to be nerve-wracking for people. It's going to be scary for people. People aren't going to trust it. And that, to me, is going to be the most interesting thing to watch. Will people eventually go with the usefulness over their potential fears and reservations? I think historically the answer is, if it's useful enough, we will all forego our own security, or the vast majority of us will ignore those security concerns and just take advantage of the feature. But I do want to hear from you guys, and I want to see some predictions about how you think all this stuff is going to go. And, do you have any ideas for like weird things like this that you think are going to be coming to our devices in the near future, guys? Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content just like this. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.